The table at right shows the profits of a small company in Tacoma during its first 5 years of operation. So we can see it looks like the company started in 2005, and this gives us information through 2009. And we can see that they started off that their profits were in the negative. So that means that they were losing money. But then notice that as time went on, they started making some money along the way. So what we're going to do with this information, they're asking us to let P be the profits the company earned T years after 2005. Draw a scatter plot for the data shown, and then draw a line that comes close to your points. And then once we've done that, we're going to find what the p-intercept of the model is and what that means. And then we're going to find what the t-intercept of the model is and what that means as well. So let's get this scatter plot drawn so we can answer these questions. So we want to see what information they've given us and what they're asking us to use. So let P be the profits the company earned. And then they're telling us that it's T years after 2005, so years after the company started. So that means up here in our table, writing down for 2005, that would be when T equals 0, because that's 0 years after 2005. And then 2006 would give us T equals 1. And notice that this just gives us years in a nice straight line. So we're going to go ahead and just 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. And notice that it says over here the first 5 years of operation, but that first year we're considering the 0 year. So that's something to kind of keep in mind with this sort of a problem. So given this information, if we just read this carefully, we can go ahead um, and get the information onto our coordinate system. So they told us to use capital P. So here's my capital P. They told us that capital P is the profits that the company earned. Here's my profits. And if you remember up on this table, we have in thousands of dollars. And so I've gone ahead and added that information here so I don't have to write my scale with all of those zeros. T is years after 2005. Now notice how our coordinate system here I've set up a little bit differently. We have our vertical axis here, but notice the horizontal axis isn't just at the bottom, it kind of goes through the middle. And notice that that's going to be important because here where I have my profits, notice that some of my profits are positive, but some of my profits are negative. So we have to be able to allow on our p-axis to have both positive and negative values. So that's why we want this to be here in the middle. Okay. And when it's in the middle, it's a little bit awkward for where we put our label for that axis. And so I'm just putting it down here at the very bottom of the graph rather than right underneath the line. Because if I put it right underneath the line, it could potentially run into information from the data as I plot it, from the scale, and some of those sorts of things. So we'll just leave it right down here at the bottom. And again, I've got my T written down here on my axis. We want to be sure that we always put the variable associated with the axis on it as well as the words that go along with it too. Okay, so we have to figure out our scale. We've got the labels on, now it's time to think about scale. And so for my year, for my independent variable, because that comes first, so that must be the independent variable, notice that we just have 5 different years that we need to account for. And on this axis, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We actually have 14 lines all the way across. So we could certainly just let each line represent 1 year, but then I would just have 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of my information would be like in this little section of my graph. So let's spread the years out. Let's use 2 lines for each year. Okay, so for years since 2005, so here's my 0, that's always going to be on that vertical axis there at the origin. And then this is going to be, I'm going to go out 2 lines for 1, and 2 lines for 2, and 2 lines for 3, and then another 2 lines, and then 4. So basically every line here is representing a half, so a half a year. So this would be halfway through 2005. Here's 2006. This is halfway through 2006. There's 2007. So you can see how that works. And this will just allow our graph to be a little bit more spread out. The more spread out our graph can be, usually the easier it is to read. For our vertical axis, remembering that we need to consider both negative and positive values, we need to go as low as a little less than negative 15, and we need to go up to 27 and a half, so almost to 28. And so in order to cover that span, we certainly aren't going to be able to scale by ones, and even by twos is a lot of ground to cover. We have to go 15 in the negative, we have to go another 27, 28 in the positive, so we have to go more than 40 units on the vertical. And so we don't really have all that many to go by. So I'm saying let's go by fives on the vertical axis. And again, you could potentially go by threes or fours. That could work for you as well. But I'm going to go ahead and just scale by fives because I like counting by fives better than I like counting by these other things. Remember, we have to stay consistent on the vertical axis. So I can't have a different scale going in the positive direction than I can in the negative. We need to keep it the same all the way along the positive. So here's from the origin, I'm going to go up first. There's 5, there's 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. That should be high enough on the positive direction. And then in the negative direction, we go -5, -10, -15, -20, -25, -30. So that gives us plenty of room on our vertical axis. Now that we've got our scale established, we can start plotting our points. So we have the point 0, -15.3. So 0, -15.3. So I need to go down just a little bit further. So it's 0, -15, and then just a little tiny smidge below that. Okay, so there's that 0, -15.3. Now we're going to do 1, -4.7. So at 1, it's -4.7, which would just be a smidge above the -5. Okay, there's -4.7. At 2, we're finally in the positive. We're at 6.8. So 2. Then there's 5, 6, and a little bit more, almost to 7, which I'm going to estimate is right about here. Notice we are having to do some estimations here. Our next point is 3, 18.1. So at 3, we're at 18.1. So there's 10, 15, 18.1, a little bit more than halfway would be right about there. And then finally at 4, we'd be at 27.5. So here I am at 4 for 4 years past 4 years past 2005, and I'm going up to 27.5. So they're finally making some money here. So there's 25. 27.5 would be halfway between 25 and 30. Okay, so we can see it's a pretty nice straight line here. Not totally linearly related, but pretty darn close. So let's grab our straight edge to draw our line that comes close to the points. So I need to go up and grab my straight edge. I'm going to bring that down. And this is just like you would do on your own paper. You're going to grab your straight edge, you're going to bring it down, you're going to line it up. I'm going to line mine up here kind of at my first point, and then I'm going to grab it and I'm going to rotate it and see kind of how that looks. And notice that they're really close to being perfectly linearly related, but just not quite. So I'm going to put my graph right, oh, went a little bit too high, right about there. And I'm going to grab my pen, and I'm going to come back and draw my line here. I'm going to go and I'm going to go past the last point that I actually graphed. So we can get rid of our straight edge now once we've drawn our line. And I can get my arrow on here because we're thinking that that's going to go on. And now we can answer some questions. So the first question is, what is the p-intercept of your model and what does it mean in this situation? Well, remember our p-intercept was down here, and that was actually one of the points we actually plotted. That was the point, remember, in the horizontal direction we went 0, And if you remember from our table of values, that was at negative 15.3. So negative 15.3, that's our p-intercept. What does that mean? Well, the 0 refers to years since 2005. So that would be the year 2005. In 2005, the profit was, in fact, it was actually a loss, right? So the profit was non-existent. So maybe we should say the company lost, just to be clearer on that. So we didn't make any money. We want to be as clear as we can when we say what this thing means. So the company lost 15.3, and remember that's in thousands of dollars. 15.3 thousand dollars. So that's what that p-intercept means in this case. We could also have written this $15.3 thousand dollars. If you're thinking about how that would look just as regular money, I'm just going to put this up here because I kind of ran out of room there. We could also write that as 15,300. That's the same thing as 15.3 thousand. So that's how much money the company lost. Now, when we talk about the t-intercept, the t-intercept is right here where it crosses the t-axis. And so with that one, where have we gone in the horizontal direction? We've gone, it looks like right about to 1.5. And then in the vertical direction, we didn't go anywhere, right? Because we're still sitting right there on that horizontal axis. So that's the t-intercept. What does it mean? Well, what is the 1.5? So 1.5 years since 2005. So that would be kind of the middle of 2006. What happened there? Well, remember the profit was 0. So that means that they weren't making any money, but they also weren't losing any money. So that's that break even point where finally they're not losing money anymore and they're moving towards gaining money. So we could say, what does that mean? So we could say in the middle of what year? Well, remember we said it's since 2005. So in the middle of 2006, oops, 2000, let me change that out. So in the middle of 2006, the company was breaking even, was breaking even. And that means they didn't have any loss, but they didn't have any profit either. And again, that's not the only way that you could word this. There's lots of different ways that you could use words to describe what's happening at that t-intercept. Now, that doesn't mean that any old way would be correct. There's also lots of wrong ways to say it, but there'd be lots of right ways to write your answer to that as well.